UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jen Durrell.
Hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
What's new on Planet Jen?
Nothing fun. Nothing fun at all.
Gosh.
I know.
Well, Talking Weird's going to be fun.
Yes, it will.
I don't know if I've had any fun, but I've been busy because my 5-year-old's homeschooling program started.
Yeah, that's right.
This
How's
week.
that?
Super fun. She's super engaged and super enthused, and the curriculum is amazing. So I'm very happy with that. And other than that, today, when I woke up this morning, my pumpkin fence, which keeps the deer and my chickens out from eating our jack-o'-lanterns, had collapsed because I'm such a shoddy handyman. So I had to rebuild that with more, reinforce it with more fence posts. # rural life. So that's it. Yeah, my life hasn't been particularly exciting. I'll tell you what I am excited about, though. I'm excited about the guests that we've got on the show tonight. Anyway, they're a creative brother team who I actually first met at a film festival I run in Midwest called Midwest Weird Fest, which I'm sporting the t-shirt of tonight in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, a number of years ago, where I played a fantastic short that I believe one of them directed. I think the other starred in. And then I did another film from the director a couple of years later. Anyway, this year we did their feature film, which we'll be talking about. We did the world premiere, and we'll get to that in a minute. But one of the brothers is a multimedia artist working in cinema, music, and writing. The mockumentary, He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes, which is what we screened at Midwest Weird Fest earlier this year and won Best Experimental Film, is his feature directorial debut, and as of this week is available on Amazon Prime. He's also the author of the dark comedy novella Brunch with Satan, and releases music under the post-punk industrial duo Solek and his solo label Post-Life Industries. Excuse me. His work is thematically concerned with social fringes, memes, religion, esoterica, and the end of the world. He's an alumni of the School of Art Institute of Chicago, where he studied design, painting, and screenwriting. His brother, and our other guest tonight, is an entertainer and performer at heart, having completed his BFA in Cinema Arts at Columbia College, Chicago. He is a lifelong actor, as well as a trained stage combatant, screenwriter, and director, and is one of the stars of He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes. He is also a practicing magician in both the entertainment and ritualistic varieties. He teaches occult knowledge on his TikTok, The Devil's Advocate, where he has grown a dedicated following. He currently lives in Chicago, collaborating with fellow creatives. At any rate, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to the show Zach and Lucas Lona.
Hey.
Greetings.
Hello.
Hello.
How we doing?
Fantastic. You're going to have to
Yes.
excuse me tonight, though. I'm probably going to be coughing occasionally. I got this, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the vid, who knows? But I had it a couple of weeks ago and it's still lingering. I'm normally somebody who gets over a respiratory thing really quickly, and I'm still like, ugh. So yeah, my apologies.
I'm sure you'll be just fine, Dean.
Anyway, I'm so
Yeah.
Man, I'm delighted to have you guys on. I haven't seen you since Midwest Weird Fest back in March of this year.
Yeah, that was a highlight of this year for sure. And we thank you for welcoming us to the film festival. You know, longtime screeners, artists, and fans. And thank you for having us on Talking Weird tonight.
Oh, well, you were a
so
delight
much.
at the fest, and I'm sure you'll be a delight tonight as well. Perhaps before we get into the film, I think Jen has the trailer there that maybe we could show the audience. Let's roll the trailer for He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes.
Just a second. Let's get that going.
It's a great trailer.
Yes, it
Fantastic. It's a fantastic film. I mean,
Spent like the whole day on it.
You heard of Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster? Well, the Hidden Man pretty much fits somewhere in that category, and it's causing havoc.
911, what's your emergency? The Hidden Man, they're coming.
I'm kind of thinking like maybe he's an alien, or maybe he's a demon.
Saw the Hidden Man. What happened? He started to change and glow.
My theory is it's just people in costumes.
The Hidden Man is a force. The Hidden Man is a keeper of esoteric messages. The Hidden Man is a mystic. The Hidden Man is Gnostic. The Hidden Man is alchemy.
When are we gonna see the Hidden Man?
You can't see him. He's hidden.
Oh my God, this.
Fantastic.
Loch Ness.
There it is.
It's fantastic. Can you tell our audience who might be aware of it, fill them in a little bit more? I mean, the trailer's a great teaser and as a setup, but maybe let us know a little bit about that broader Hidden Lakes mythology.
Yeah, so based on the trailer, it's kind of a adventure comedy, a little bit of fantasy elements of like a mockumentary style, surrealist odyssey. It's a whole bunch of different things, but it centers around the journey of a mystic, a cult leader, and a cop who Lucas plays as they search and sort of lose their minds on the journey to discover who is the Hidden Man.
Lucas is fantastic in that crazy cop role as well. Where'd you take your inspiration for that role from, Lucas?
Oh, thank you. It's funny because I took a lot of inspiration from a few different spots, which all kind of fit the same archetype of like this, like the big thing about Walden's character that it's his fall, from race of sorts. So I kind of took inspiration from the idea of Lucifer. I even, funny enough, because I was connecting it to like my own emotions I had in that point, and also looking back and what I really enjoyed growing up. Anakin Skywalker came to mind in my mind. I was like, okay, going mad, going crazy, and just like wanting to destroy everything because it's not going your way. Those are Lucifer and Anakin are the ones that kind of come to mind when initially for that question.
Fantastic. We're going to get into some of the influences on the film, at least as far as from an esoteric or cryptid level or a Gnostic level, because I know there's an awful lot of that. And we'll talk about some of those things as well, which is probably what our audience will most be interested in hearing. But one of the most historical things about this film, which we'll only touch briefly, because if it was a film podcast, I'd talk about it for the whole show, but it's not a film specific podcast. And that is you're the very first film to have sold based on an NFT model, which is quite revolutionary and is getting a lot of interest, I think, in the independent distribution and financing world. Could you, Zach, just fill us in just briefly what that NFT sale actually is, what NFT means, and how you put all that together?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. I mean, we are like verifiably the first film in history to sell as a single edition NFT. And if you don't know what an NFT is, it's basically a blockchain-based certificate of authenticity that can be universally verified no matter who's looking at it. So we're the first. It's a super new technology. Cryptocurrency is a very new space, and I personally think it's here to stay. So we saw an opportunity for the distribution of He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes to really kind of like think of a new way to treat independent film and to think about independent film. So the idea behind releasing it as an NFT is that we will sell it as a sort of like film as fine art. And until that film sells, He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes will never be available publicly before that moment. So early July of this year, we actually sold the NFT for about a sum of $5,000, which is great. It's like an advance you would get from a distributor in the independent film world, but we didn't. There was no release of rights or copyrights or intellectual property or anything like that So we still own, all the rights to our films, and we get this, nice sum. And then our collector also gets 50% of the streaming revenue from He Lives in Hidden Lake. So that's the incentive for them to buy it there. So it's super new ideas. We're kind of like, testing out a lot of things. And I'm sure if you Google it around, you'll be able to find a lot more on that particular story.
And as I said in the intro, it's now, you have released it since you've made that NFT sale now, and people can watch it as of now on Amazon Prime, right?
Yeah, it is. If you have Amazon Prime subscription, you can watch it for free. And if you don't, then you can pay a one-time fee to watch it. So it is publicly released.
Oh, it's fantastic. I would encourage people, particularly anybody with an interest in the weird, which I suspect most of our audience do, to watch that. It's such a fun, crazy, and an experimental ride. That's why it won, obviously, Best Experimental Film at Midwest Weird Fest, because it does things which people mightn't be used to in some ways, in even mockumentary cinema, which is kind of what it is. I mean, it's a little bit deeper than just your standard mockumentary tale. And because I think we're going to talk about how it is deeper, this might be a good segue into to tell me a little bit about some of the influences behind that movie, Zach.
Yeah, I mean it's wide ranging. It's as wide ranging as the conditions of what the film actually is. You see the Enneagram symbol in the trailer that comes from George Gurdjieff, who I don't think he wrote many books himself, but he was a sort of kind of an occultist, definitely like an esoteric sort of like thinker from the early 20th century. Who had a lot of ideas surrounding like art and like the condition of the universe and things like this. And the Enneagram is very loosely defined, not as a personality test, although it has become that now as well due to some of his followers. It's more of like a way to sort of graphically explain any particular phenomena that might take place in the universe. And Gurdjieff's philosophy is super like esoteric and this, to a point where I don't even really understand it. But that Enneagram symbol was general enough and cool enough looking to where I was like, okay, we'll use it for the film. And yeah, the cryptid element is kind of central to the film's concept. I'm super interested in cryptids themselves. I happen to believe that a good handful of them probably exists. There's so many out there. And then also as like a sociological phenomenon too. I think all that is super fascinating. So the film itself, I'm really glad I get to talk about this because this is like the first time in a public forum that I've been able to talk about like the artistic influences behind the film. So that's really great. But it's essentially mapping the journey of a meme. So like an idea that spreads in its smallest possible transferable unit across a community. And the Hidden Man is, the meme par excellence because he could be anything to anybody, anytime, anywhere.
I hadn't thought of that meme aspect of it, but now when I'm looking back at the movie, you're obviously dead on. You created it, so but the sociological aspect of it, I loved an awful lot. And it reminded me of what I think is the greatest strength of Spielberg's Close Encounters, which is when the character played by Francois Truffaut, who's meant to essentially be Jacques Vallée, when he's talking about the UFO phenomenon and these people having these experiences, he says it's a sociological phenomenon. And I think Close Encounters is at its strongest when it's looking at UFO belief as a sociological phenomenon or a psychological phenomenon. And then at the end, of course, it has to do the very literal, physical Disney kind of ending where happy little angels come extraterrestrials, drop down with the beautiful score, and it's a pretty light show. Your film remains in a more esoteric, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, and there certainly are massive revelations in it, but it still is able to, right up to the very last moment, is able to understand esoteric phenomena as somehow sociological or related to, and maybe that's the meme thing you're talking about. I don't know if there's any more you can, if Close Encounters was an influence on you, or if that idea was an influence as well. Or...
It's been like probably like 15 years since I've seen Close Encounters, but I mean that you put it in a perfect way where it's kind of the physical manifestation of this phenomenon is sort of downstream of the sociological phenomenon. So they sort of like intertwine with each other and they make each other real, right? Mm-hmm. So the UFO phenomenon is a shared myth and a shared story that we tell each other at this point in history, and it's also, as we've seen in the disclosure that's been happening with the federal government, mm-hmm. it's pretty real. Like so. The film is about essentially, I put it as making memes flesh. So making the ideas real that we all have in our heads, sharing them, and then they ultimately culminate in a physical phenomenon.
Fascinating. I can't leave disclosure alone now you brought it up.
Yeah.
So what's your take on what's been going on as far as the DoD release and all the excitement around the Tic Tac videos and other videos and the like?
I've always been a believer myself. So none of this is a surprise for me. I'm more interested in why it's coming out. That's an interesting question that I don't have a lot of insights on. But Lucas, do you have anything to add there?
What, to like the aliens thing? Because like because it feels like even outside of aliens, everything in the world is kind of like reaching this like climax point. Maybe everyone's like, well, we're all in at this point. Here's some aliens for you. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's as to why things are happening now. It could be anyone's guess, but the fact is that it's happening now, and there's got to be some meaning to it, at least from a subconscious level. Especially like when you put in like, this is just me guessing here, but like looking at numerology and centuries and patterns, none of which I can remember right now, but seeing the evolution of how aliens are being perceived versus how they're being perceived now, especially through technology, very interesting stuff.
It reminds me of something Art Bell, perhaps the greatest progenitor of the type of show that we do now. No one's ever going to be as good as Bell was at this, I think. But he was talking about, he thought we were entering a period he termed the quickening. Like everything seemed to be speeding up and getting crazier, and there seemed to be more revelations. And it's interesting then that you were talking about the idea that it seems like everything's coming to a peak or coming to a point. And I know when I read your intro at the beginning, Zach, that you said you have an interest in doomsday, I think, or the end of the world, or words to that extent. Do you feel we're in a period now where, I guess in a Christian ontological view or eschatological view, rather, it would be considered the end times, or that we're in maybe a new age sense, which we're at the end of an age or the opening of a new age? Or do you have any idea that we're in this moment of transformation at the moment as a species?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. It's funny you bring that up because I could talk for hours about crypto, but essentially suffice to say that I think crypto is like a generation machine for entering into that new sort of paradigm. And astrologically, God, we're just going all over the place with the references here. But astrologically, we're entering into a new era. I mean, that's pretty cut and dry, as far as the planetary alignments and these things. Mm-hmm. So it kind of matches up with, the 2,000-year period of, the progenation of Christ as, the era of Pisces, I think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it goes to touch on another influence of the film itself, is Terence McKenna. I was really into Terence McKenna when I was sort of formulating the base level ideas of He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes. And there's obviously, well, maybe not obviously for people who haven't seen it, but there's a super strong like psychedelic element to it, where essentially the characters are taking mushrooms. But Terence McKenna had this really interesting notion that the universe as we know it is sort of, I quote, a novelty generation machine. So you start with the base level of the universe, whether that's the Big Bang or however this universe that we live in came to be, and from that point, suns formed, and then planets formed, and then a life-supporting planet formed, and then there's algae and single-cell organisms, and then it evolves up to the complex beings that we are. So you can kind of see how there's some truth to that the universe is a novelty generation machine, and it's somehow pointing to like an end of history. And this is McKenna's idea still. So I think the era we're in is absolutely on the cusp of transitioning to that end of like the end of history, the transcendental object at the end of time, as he put it.
Do you think, and this is maybe a strange question, maybe one and I'll get both of your opinions on this. And before I ask the question, I suppose I'll talk about a previous guest we had on who was also a filmmaker and an occultist. His name was John Harrigan, and he's made this wonderful film called Light Ships. He's also he's practicing occultist as well as a director of theater and a director of film, and he looks at the process as well as the product of his creative artistry being ritualistic and perhaps manifesting some type of change or being part of some larger changes. I know there are lots of esoteric messages and ideas, as we've already spoken about, within Hidden Lakes, and I certainly know that both of you are very conscious of these kind of ideas, and Lucas is actually a practicing magician or occultist. So was there any ritualistic sense, or that you were being part of something, or that you were trying to evoke something when you made this film?
I think Lucas can give his own take on it, but as far as I'm concerned, as directing the thing, the mockumentary format was like conceptually very important to that exact thing. Where I see the mockumentary format as like I wanted to use it as almost like this ritualistic medium, because in keeping with the idea of the manifestations of memes being downstream from the stories that we tell each other sociologically, there's like a bending of reality there where you're making memes flesh. So the form had to follow the content with the film, where the mockumentary assumes the audience assumes that it's like real. So when we're actually making the film, the actors largely didn't have lines. It was mostly improvised. It was a very run and gun type of shoot, where we're just shooting with shoulder mounted DSLR cameras, and it all felt very like down to earth and real. And the characters had to act as if they were real people. Obviously that seems stupid when you're shooting a movie. It's like that's what an actor does, but essentially there's a lot of fourth wall breaking moments in this film, where the context of a character looking at the camera in one scene may be completely different from the character looking at the camera in another scene, right? So in one scene, they're acknowledging the camera as a actual person who knows that there's a camera there. In another scene, it's completely cinematic. There's no camera there to them at all. So I wanted to express that sort of reality bending creation of myth, essentially, if that makes sense. But Lucas can weigh in on that.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that this was of what I would consider, at least on my end, a ritualistic piece. Again, especially from my end, because in my opinion, I like to think that all forms of entertainment, books, movies, video games, music, etc., they are energetic portals that allow you to your subconscious, or even your conscious, if you get enough into it, to kind of submerge itself into an alternate reality of sorts. And when one could just be talking on symbolism here, some people might even take it to a very literal level, especially when you talk about cosplayers and stuff, and actors and people literally personifying what they've seen in entertainment, because as we all know, like especially nowadays, everything has been a remix of something else. From the oldest tales ever told, it's grown like a tree branch up until now into the 21st century, and everything is connected in one way or another. And I especially look at this from, I believe it was the comic writer Alan Moore. He literally wrote a comic, I believe it was Jerusalem, as a ritualistic spell piece to end the world, which of course didn't mean like, oh, the Earth's going to blow up. It meant, oh, hey, this is the end of a way of thinking once you've read the piece. And I feel like He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes, maybe even on a subconscious level, was going for something like that. And I know, especially for me, playing Garrett Walden, that was definitely a personal journey that I took when putting on that role, because we shot this thing right after I got out of college. Like, this was my first feature role. It was something that was a great thing to take on. It was no laughing matter. It was no small thing. So it was almost kind of like a death and a rebirth for me personally, as a actor, as a professional, as a person. Say, okay, we're getting serious now. That's kind of how I take it. And what I really do love about the movie, especially just in its themes, it's also its relation to Lovecraftian themes. They're definitely undertones, but definitely we do live, I would say, in a more cynical world right now. And I do feel there are some things, especially within the Lovecraftian thing of doom and the unfathomable, which does come out into the film as well, which all of that, just as it coalesces, it's very, very interesting to me.
There's certainly and I don't want to spoil anything for people who haven't seen it yet, but there's certainly a massive transformation of your character in that film, Lucas. So I can understand how that must have been as an actor, I'm assuming it was quite a powerful experience as well. And there's also a sense in it of Gnosticism, or a hidden doctrine, or a hidden reality that is released somehow through that. Is that something you can both talk about as well?
Yeah. It's hard to talk about that bit without getting into spoiler territory.
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't care about spoilers. I think the film should sort of stand on its own. But for people who don't feel the same way, we'll keep it. We'll keep the fun. We'll keep the lid on. But yeah, I mean, what I've tried to do is I have a background in painting, as you touched on in the introduction. And I see painting as like almost like a cinema that is just a single frame. So everything that you could put in a movie, but when you're making a painting, especially like, from an art historical perspective, you need to have like a system. Like, this thing has to mean, such and such. And I'm not well versed. I'm very rusty on my art history. I wouldn't be able to give an example of that at this moment. But with the film, I've tried to. If you watch it very closely, it rewards like the super close viewer. Where if you look at the images, the cinematic images that are being presented to you in the film as a medium, you're going to be greatly rewarded, because that Gnostic element, that accessing of a higher knowledge and a higher self, a higher consciousness, is going to be super apparent with the like 2D physical images that I'm weaving the story around. And that's that's like the mushrooms. There's like a fish element that ties into the fact that it's called Hidden Lakes. And I won't spoil too much of the fun, but at the same time, like, as people are seeing it, I'm like, I don't feel like people are picking up on this stuff quite so much. So hopefully it's a rolling process, but that's what I have to say about it.
Your take on that, Lucas? Your sense of the Gnosticism in there?
Absolutely, because especially from an acting point of view, how I view acting, just in general, is from a Gnostic transformative position, because I feel the actor is quite literally invoking a character. And, for those that don't know, invocation in a ritualistic practice is to bring in a spirit or an energy into the body, into the self, and to kind of mingle and coalesce with it, where it gets something from you and you get something from it, and it becomes kind of a union and a unity. And therefore, by becoming the character becomes you, and then you learn things about yourself from that experience, which And then, of course, in the film itself, there's a lot of a lot of Gnostic lessons and stuff, but I don't really want to touch on that again for spoiler reasons. But at least from an acting point of view, even that I consider, depending if the actor wants to go that way, could be very ritualistic or Gnostic if they're looking for self-transformation in their roles, if they go that route.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have a background in like occult practices and like esoteric stuff in general, and you're looking for the symbols in the film and you're reading it almost as you would like a painting, the question of the Gnostic element will hopefully be very apparent.
I think there's very strong symbolism in a behind the scenes story that you told Zach on stage when we were doing the Q&A at Midwest Weird Fest in Eau Claire back in March. And I'm not sure, I don't think you suggested then there was esoterica involved. It only just dawned on me then when we were talking about symbolism and transformation. Of course, in the Norse myth system, I guess, for lack of a better term, that's probably the incorrect term, but the Norse mythos, there's a sense that Odin had to give up his eye for a second sight or more, I suppose, a better ability to see the other world or a better connection with something more mysterious. And you had a serious eye injury and almost lost your eye when you were making this film. Hey, tell us a little bit about that story. But at the time or since, has it ever hit you that maybe there was some very bizarre esoteric meaning behind this injury?
Yeah, I think that's correct, Dean. Yeah, when we were shooting this, we shot for like 10 days straight in principal photography. Not a easy task at all. And if on my next film, we're not gonna shoot for that many days in a row.
No.
So by day 7, we were all feeling it, and we had to set up a fire pyre, quote unquote, in the woods. So we had to gather up a bunch of sticks, and I, being the director, wanted the best sticks. So the best sticks were up in the tree. They were laying on the branches. So I took a bigger stick and kind of, poked up at the tree, and then a branch fell on my eye, and I got a corneal abrasion. And to this day, it was like the worst physical pain that I've ever been in. And I've, had my share of injuries. So, and I also have a high pain tolerance too, physically. So, I had to direct through like an eye patch, and right after the shoot that day, we had to go to the emergency room because the hospital wasn't open, and they were like, yeah, just I couldn't look at light because it was, the thing was so sensitive. But this is the first time that I'm considering that might have had some mythological, like some mythopoetic weight to it. I've joked in the past that, and this is going to sound so friggin' pretentious, but I love the way this sounds. The cinema tried to take my eyesight, but it could not take my vision. Because we finished the film. We finished the film, and it's exactly what it needed to be. So, yeah, that's an interesting thought. Absolutely.
You were talking before about your interest in memes becoming real or memes becoming flesh, and we both live in. I mean, you're further south than me, and I'm further north than it happened. But what's your take on Slender Man? That's literally almost what you're talking about, meme turn becoming flesh or becoming real, right?
Yeah, Lucas and I talk about this sometimes, where we were really young when Slender Man was like, at its peak. I think I was in like middle school or something. But that meme, that myth, that cryptid, ended up causing a lot of like real physical harm to people. Like I think there was like a stabbing or something, like super, like
Mm-hmm.
The memes drive people to do crazy things, whether it's a physical entity or not. There's a certain reality to the thought form of that meme. So yeah, I think I've always been interested in cryptids, like checking out Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster books at the library as like a super tiny kid, and then when Slender Man became this phenomenon when we were really young. There's a lot of like foundational monster myths that formed my personality, at least.
No, I was a child. I was a child of the '70s, so I don't know if you've seen. It wouldn't be on TV anymore, but you might have watched it on YouTube or seen old episodes of it. In Search of was very formative on my view of the paranormal. The show that Leonard Nimoy used to host, and that very potent Nimoy voice talking about everything from Bigfoot through Loch Ness Monster to ghosts to missing people. It really, I think, had this incredible impact. And you do have to wonder that, and I always do, what the actual result is of talking about these things or presenting these things more. Has it ever occurred to you that if that your bigger hidden lakes kind of mythology cycle, or He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes itself, became super popular, if people would start seeing or reporting the hidden man, the kind of mythological creature come cryptid of that film?
From the outset, that's my goal. So it's not done yet. We're still manifesting that one, Dean. That is absolutely. I'm not done until there is a hidden man sighting in the real world.
As soon as you hear that, we got to get you on the show and talk about it.
Yeah,
I'll be waiting. I'll be here.
So what's your take on what's your both of you? I'll get yours first, Zach, then Lonas, and then yours, rather, Lucas. What's your take on Bigfoot, like Sasquatch? Do you think it's physical, or do you think it's something else? Or
I mean, I've seen enough, Facebook cryptid groups to be like, that seems pretty convincing. And we're in film, so like we know how easy it is to fake certain things.
Yeah.
We know how easy it is to we can see the imperfect. We have a very trained eye for this kind of stuff, and a lot of it, I shouldn't say a lot of it, but there's enough to convince me that I think there is something out there for sure. Whenever I think about Bigfoot, I always think about this stupid 4chan screenshot that I've seen where it's like, okay, the newest Bigfoot theory is Bigfoot is actually a two-dimensional creature, and whenever someone sees it and they take a picture, it just turns around. So it's just like,
yeah.
I'm not doing it justice. The actual screenshot is hilarious, but
I'll talk about another cryptid which actually is meant to be like that in a minute. But Lucas, give me your take on Sasquatch first.
I think it's definitely real. Now I don't buy into a lot of the evidence that has come up, but of the ones that show both like visually and even in some cases scientifically, like, yeah, this should not be explainable with what we know right now. Yeah, I believe that there is something like Bigfoot or Sasquatch out there, especially since I believe we as people kind of overestimate how much we think we know about the forest and the oceans and the space and everything. But it's like, oh yeah, we know how that works. We're discovering new stuff every day, every year, and who's to say these things aren't intelligent and know how to hide from us? Because let's be honest, humans are really dangerous. So I would say there's definitely room for them to be real. I don't believe in every single sighting that comes across my feed, but of the things that have stood the test of time within the idea of Bigfoot and Sasquatch, I think there's some merit to it. Absolutely.
It's interesting, Zach, that you made the point saying that you're filmmakers, so you're more conscious perhaps of cinematic tricks and special effects and the like. We had another filmmaker we played this year, Kerry Pryor, who we did the Revenant retrospective of, and then we did the Blair Rabbit Project, which was a mockumentary as well, ironically. And he takes that same position. He's actually a guy with a background in special effects and visual effects and special makeup effects, and he thinks the Patterson-Gimlin footage is showing a real creature. Now, I'm a little more skeptical than that, to be honest. I'm not sure, but it's interesting that you as filmmakers say something similar to another alumnus from the year that you were there, Kerry Pryor, who we've had on the show, and said something very similar to that.
Yeah, Kerry's great. We had the pleasure of meeting him very briefly. And we were at the screening of The Revenant. Fantastic film. Yeah, I mean, well, as far as the Patterson-Gimlin footage, the only thing that's tripping me up about it is the soles of the feet. like the film stock should render some sort of lighting. It looks too flat to me. That's the only thing tripping me up about it.
Yeah, there's, I've always, when I was younger, was a kid watching In Search of, I thought there were giant ape men prowling the woods of America. I mean, I did. I still think people are seeing something. I just don't think it's physical, but that's a conversation I could rant about for a long time. But the interesting thing with Patterson Gimlin is one of the people who supposedly has come forward and said, I forget it. I should know his name because I'm not doing my audience any favor by saying forget his name. But one of the people who came forward and said, "Yeah, I was the guy in the suit who was also a cowboy who knew Patterson and knew Gimlin."
Yeah.
You can see footage of him walking today, and he walks like Paddy or whatever they call that beast. Like he's got a weird stride, like just normally walking, and this strange stride. They go, "Oh, that's not the way a human walks." You watch this guy, man. That's the way he walks. So, I mean, I don't know. Quickly too, before I get into some other questions with you guys, the cryptid I was talking about, or the legendary beast I was talking about that you might or might not have heard about, is meant to be in this part of the world actually, or was. It was one of those lumberjack stories that people told. It was the idea of the hide behind, and the hide behind, like you were suggesting, the Bigfoot that would turn on its side and disappear, the 2D Bigfoot. The hide behind was meant to be so slim that it would be behind you and it would be able to be, it would become invisible because it was so slim by hiding behind trees or hiding behind other things. And it took people. And I've always been interested in the David Paulides missing 411 stuff. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Paulides at all. Paulides, I think, is, whether he's right or not, is one of the more interesting people maybe in the last 10 years in the paranormal field. He was somebody who was a Bigfoot investigator, but also a retired police officer. And one time when he was in a national park, I'll tell the story very quickly because most of our audience will probably know it. Two rangers knocked on his door and said, "You should investigate missing cases in national parks because there's a lot and they're not talked about." Anyway, Paulides has gone on since to write half a dozen or more books. And they started with national parks, but it moved out to other places as well. But there are this incredible amount of very strange disappearances in national parks and, like I said, other places. And I always thought, I wonder if it was the hide behind, or I wonder if those lumberjacks were onto something. Something's out there. It can disappear and snatch people. So who knows?
Yeah. That or the Fae.
Yeah.
Ask Zach and Lucas a little bit about the Fae, Jeff.
Yeah.
You should ask them a little bit about the Fae. I know that's one of your favorite topics.
Oh, well, we were just talking about 411. So Fae is a good example of missing people, right?
Good point.
Lucas talks to me about the Fae all the time. And I don't know. I really don't know anything about them. So take it away.
I mean, because like I'm not like a master on the Fae or anything. I still have a lot to learn in that regard. I have a couple friends that I've found on occult spaces and such things that do know a thing or two about the Fae. And what I do know is that they're not this like, and Jen, I'm sure you're probably aware of this, but they're not this like, oh, Tinkerbell butterfly thing. Like they're terrifying. They eat your kids. Yeah. And like whenever you see like a little mushroom circle, I think they were like, literally grown people will be like, do not step in there. You will like, do not tell Fae thank you. Do not accept their gifts. That's pretty much all I remember. But I think I remember a friend was saying that a lot of Halloween is based off of the Celtic, believe it was Celtic traditions of warding off the Fae, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. It's not what people think it is, because of the whole Disney and everything, taking fairies and making it into like Peter Pan and whatnot.
That's very true.
No, Jen, you go. I started to speak over you. I've been hogging the conversation.
Well, no, I was just saying it's very true. I mean, even I have a odd circle that pops up around a tree every once in a while. And so we have my daughter and I have our own little fairy garden. And so every once in a while we'll go out and leave offerings just in case. We don't know, but.
Gotta stay safe.
Yeah.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm super skeptical about most things, but I don't mess with the fair folk. And I think that's part of the reason is I just kind of like the old-fashioned nature of saying don't mess with the fair folk. But I'm also conscious that they were called fairies or the fair folk for a reason. They were also called the gentry. It's because you didn't want to insult them. Back in the day, people didn't want to say, anything bad about these entities that they believed interacted us. And to your point, Lucas, you're absolutely right. They weren't all little Tinkerbell type fairies. They were everything from diminutive, sure, maybe not always this diminutive, sometimes, but to our size to bigger. There was a large range of things that operated in another world which coexisted with ours and came in and out of our reality. And that's one of the things about He Who Lives in Hidden Lakes. I think it captures, and this might have been a bit of an influence on you, or at least a broader sense that there are these things that come and go and interact with us, and we can't quite put our finger on, perhaps.
Absolutely.
And I have a question I have to ask you, Lucas, before as we start to come towards the end of the show, although we've still got a little bit to go. I know when we had your bio on the web site for Talking Weird, when you were one of our guests, and we're very gracious that you were one of our guests, I know you'd written, ask him about his magic book collection. So I'm asking you about your magic book collection. You've got to tell me and the audience a little bit about it.
Of course. I brought that up initially because the fun fact I was going to tell people if they came and asked me about it was that quite a few of my books actually show up in a scene in the movie. You can see kind of that like the desk. There was like a desk and there was like a bookshelf, and I remember Zach was like, "Hey, can we use some of your books?" And I was like, "Don't bend them, and you're all good."
Yeah, don't use the expensive ones.
Yeah, I did not give him like the limited expensive ones. I gave like the paperbacks and some of the easy to find hardbacks. But yeah, no, it's funny. I was not an avid reader. I didn't even really like reading until I got into the occult and into magic. And then from there, it just exploded. And yeah, there's a lot of books I've read. There's a lot of books I still need to get to. I kind of have more books than I can keep up with. So I kind of got to like pump the brakes for a second. But I love the written works of esotericism and the occult from just about every aspect you can think of. I got stuff on angels, demons, contemporary, new stuff, older stuff from like the 1700s and the grimoire tradition, all that. What do I have? I think I've got some even some things on Wicca, some things on ideas like making the Lovecraftian entities actually workable. It's all sorts of weird stuff out there that it's just so cool.
What's your favorite? If you have a favorite, what is your favorite book or the most influential in that type of esoteric writings?
Ooh. Oh shoot. I usually have it next to me. I don't have it next to me, ironically enough. But it was actually the first book I ever bought of my own volition outside of school. And a lot of occultists scoff at this book. They don't like it. And a part of me doesn't blame them for it. It was called the Simon Necronomicon. And what it is, it's like an amalgamation of pseudo-Sumerian mythology mixed with Western ceremonial magical rituals from like what you would expect from like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, etc., mixed with the undertones and atmospheric psychodrama of Lovecraft. And that's why it was kind of called the Necronomicon, because it was considered to be like a forbidden thing when you have this idea of chaos magic, which is use what works, screw dogma. This kind of took that idea and took this system that's kind of under Reconstructionism right now, which is the Sumerian, the commonly known idea of ceremonial magic, and then the psychodrama of Lovecraftian thought process, and turning that into a workable magical system. I remember the first time I read it, I'm like, I don't know what I'm reading right now, but I love it. Like, I wasn't a reader, and I knocked out that 300-page book in like 24 hours. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy.
I think that Lovecraft connection with some modern occult workers is fascinating. And it's this idea, which we were talking about earlier, so it ties into the sense of a meme becoming flesh, or the representation of film having, a broader ritualistic meaning or something. The fact that what was written by essentially an atheist materialist, which is what Lovecraft was, the mythology that he built has become influential on many occultists. So again, it's this common theme of our conversation of the fiction or the invented in somebody's imagination, then making that a massive leap from here to from the mind or from the internal to an external reality which can impact other people. I find the idea fascinating.
The weirdest part about it is it's like I think I read somewhere, I need to remember where I heard this. I think he was experimenting with paganism when he was like 7 or 8 or something, and then it didn't pass. But a lot of the entities that you hear about, Cthulhu, Azathoth, Nyarlathotep, all came from his dreams. And there are many people out there that believe dreams are portals to another reality. So some people speculate that he was actually a gifted medium and that he found these terrible entities and was actually translating them into portals in the means of narrative, which, if that's true, is terrifying.
Yeah, if the mythos is real. I see Jen nodding her head, though, because I know many of your paranormal experiences are dream linked, right, Jen?
Yeah. No, it makes sense to me that you're going somewhere else. So, yeah.
I'm interested to hear more. Maybe there are other episodes, but this piques my interest very much.
No, it is. I think it is fascinating. I think in the West, in the modern West, not because once upon a time it was part of our tradition, and it's always been this golden strain which runs through much of the type of esoterica that Lucas has been talking about, but it also runs through the tradition of romantic poets who would see a deeper reality within reality. And I think it runs through much that people experience today, but who have to, because we're living in this age tainted by scientism, feel determined to lock it into some physical explanation. And that's even the same for people who believe in UFOs or Bigfoot or ghosts. They want to lock it down scientifically, even though science ignores it. And Charles Fort taught us that science would ignore it. But there's a difference between the small imagination, or I think Patrick Harper, one of the great writers on this type of thinking in demonic reality, made the big distinction, and he's absolutely right, and other people have as well. I can't remember the exact terminology, but let's just say there's the little imagination, which is the type of imagination when you're sitting here and maybe daydreaming about, I want to go to the beach and lay in the sun and have a beer because it's a nice day, and you're just thinking like that, to a bigger imagination, something that maybe Carl Jung would have called a collective unconscious or something, where we're tapping in to these bigger, broader, mythical understandings. And the Islamicist Henry Corbin wrote in a much similar way that there was this tradition in Eastern mysticism of the imaginal, and the imaginal world shouldn't be confused with the type of little imagination. It's a bigger imagination, and people who experience that, it's as ontologically real as this desk that I'm knocking on, and it's in some ways more fundamentally transformative or important. And so people who have an experience with something like a ghost or a UFO or a Bigfoot, perhaps that mightn't fit into the physical world that we're used to, but there might be an imaginal realm that sometimes we interconnect with. Maybe as we once interconnected with the fair folk, and some people still do. There might be this place which isn't, when I say imaginative, not that dismissive way, like, stop, it's all in your imagination, meaning you're all just dreaming it up. Maybe there's a world that sense lets us interconnect with.
Yeah, and to bring it full circle, that's one of the core tenets of Gurdjieff's philosophy, is that there is no immateriality. Everything is material, regardless of if we can perceive it or not. So everything is tangible. It's just a matter of whether our consciousness is able to perceive it as tangible.
No, I think that's one of the great failings that we have today, is dismissing things which are as meaningful to us as things which are scientifically measurable, but we just dismiss them because they don't fit within the current concept of what's real or not. It bothers me, not necessarily on any scientific or real or not real level, but it bothers me that we've slid away from it as a society, and that we can't welcome that imaginal space into our world, or we're not encouraged to. And people who do are either dismissed, or they want so much to prove it scientifically. So,
And-
Yeah. Go ahead.
What I was going to say, it's such a shame too when you look back in history and realize that I think it was up until the Industrial Revolution area, magic and science went hand in hand. You know, magic was done in a scientific method type of way, and science was explaining what magic was doing. So they were working in tandem with each other. But it was somewhere around, I think it was the Industrial Revolution, don't quote me on that they just started branching out, like away from each other, and now we're kind of in the time of rationalism, I think it's called. And it's a shame because they were meant to work together, and now they're like on the opposite poles, so socially now.
Yeah, Newton was an alchemist.
That's what I was about to say. Exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of these people did believe in a supernatural reality as well. Most of the great early scientists were, obviously, because it was the cultural situation, were Christians. They didn't have a problem with the sense of the world having a more supernatural or more meaningful nature than what modern science tends to tell us, where everything doesn't have any deeper significance than the fact that it exists or it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's that. To go back to Terrence McKenna, that's one of my favorite stories that he told. And I haven't been able to verify this, but who needs verification, right? It goes against exactly what we're talking about. But he had this. I don't know if it was Rousseau or like one of the early like scientific philosophers. I'm not an expert on any of that, but he said that one of the pioneers of like modern science started their work. He was a soldier beforehand. But one night he had a dream, and an angel came to him and said, the conquest of nature will be achieved by measure and number. And then that thought possessed him. And he went to, forge the foundations of what we now know as modern science. So modern science is the creation of an angel, essentially, in that story, which is an interesting thing to ponder. If that is indeed a path that the angel has laid out for us, it's almost like this intentional thing where it's like we're straying away from this more imagination-based sense of perceiving the world. It's interesting to think about.
Absolutely.
What a fascinating conversation with you guys tonight. We'll have to have you both back on. I love conversations like this that just can go wherever they want to go. But tell us about it. Let's start with you, Zach, and then Lucas can tell us how how our audience can see him. Where do we watch the film? How do we follow what you're doing? And yeah, just lay it all out for our audience.
Yeah, for the film, go to whoisthehiddenman.com, and there will be links there explaining our NFT crypto model, and then primarily links to watch the film on Prime Video and also Vimeo on demand. So much appreciated any watches there. And then if you want to follow me personally, you can go to zachlona.com. I'm most active on Twitter, which is linked on there on my website, and you can see all the other kind of weird art projects that I'm involved in, including things that I've previously screened at Midwest Weird Fest. So.
And Lucas, how do we get a hold of you or see what you're up to?
Absolutely. So like Zach said, the movie is on Amazon and Vimeo. If you want to follow me personally, I am most active on TikTok, which is my like educational esoteric page. You can both my Instagram and my TikTok, I believe, are the same. It's at the Devil's Advocate 415. That's where you can find me. And then I've also got other links connected to those. So you really only need one, and then you'll be able to reach me on like Twitter and YouTube and stuff.
Man, well, what a joy having you both on. Until we chat again, which hopefully will be soon, both of you guys need to keep it weird.
Keep it weird.
Keep it weird.
Jen, thank you both so much for having us tonight. Super great conversation.
This is awesome.
Always a joy. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe and keep it